So there's this perception in the market, and I think, in the business world in general, where you have human resources managers just don't have a very top reputation. And so in this particular episode, which is actually the first episode in uh, a new additional podcast that I'm launching called $1 Billion Teams. So this is the $1 Billion Teams podcast. But what I'm gonna try and do in this podcast, and the goal, the purpose of it is just to show you and share with entrepreneurs out there, executives, managers, founders, CEOs, people that have started businesses and are looking to get to that next level, maybe where they can get to $1 billion revenue mark. But unlike a lot of my other content where I talk about kind of the marketing, maybe even sales, the purpose of this podcast is really just to look at something that's commonly forgotten in the world of business, and that's people. Because people, like beginner entrepreneurs, and I can kind of tell this because in my own experience, right, in the business world, beginner entrepreneurs will look at marketing, sales, client acquisition, this kind of thing. Really seasoned entrepreneurs, the guys that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, guess what they look at? They look at things like teamwork and people and leadership and motivation, motivating their people and building the right people in a company. And that's how they're able to achieve $1 billion outcomes. So uh, I'm still gonna be talking in my other stuff about all the marketing and sales and things like that, which I find very fun. But the purpose of this podcast is to really explore and share with you guys what it really takes to put together a $1 billion team, a team that can really build a substantial business, scale whatever you're doing and take it to a $1 billion level. But that's not gonna happen without that $1 billion team. So the thing is, human resources managers tend to get a really bad rap and have a bad reputation. I think they are seen as lacking in imagination. They're seen as boxed in a world that's kind of artificial. Like they don't. In a lot of cases, I was reading online recently where I think one of the guys was saying how in a lot of the business he'd worked in, he discovered that these human resources managers basically knew nothing about the business at all. Like they didn't know what goes on in the manufacturing space. They didn't know what goes on in the marketing department, what goes on in all these things around how their product is made, how it gets to the buyer, how it's even sold at the buyer, what happens operationally to keep the bit. Like they had no idea, and I think that's I think that's kind of probably not an atypical kind of experience. So it's so bad. I don't know how the human resources industry got into this mess. I'm not like a deep inside of the human resources industry. My own background is I started out in software development in product, and then I eventually transitioned to digital marketing, copywriting, things like that, and sales. So that's my own work. That's the stuff that I'm focused. That I'm focused. That's my kind of natural space of thinking. So I have no idea how the human resources industry got itself into this mess, but get itself into a mess it did because it's gotten so bad where I think it would be fairly, you know, accurate to say that a lot of human resources managers don't know that it would be easier to win a Super Bowl if you had Tom Brady on your team. you know, you know. just as like a litmus test. Like, do they know this? No, they don't. So what good would they be if you're trying to go and win a Super Bowl champion and then you put a human resources manager in charge of building a roster to try to get yourself a champion? Like, you won the championship, but the human resources manager, because he literally, like this guy was saying, how in his companies, these human resources managers didn't bother to know about the business, how the business operates, what needs to happen. So you might want the Super Bowl, but your human resources manager, at least in the way they are recruiting people, they basically don't care. I don't know what they care about. I have no idea. Like I said, I'm new to the human resources industry. I haven't yet figured out the great secret of, so what do they care about if they don't win, if they don't care about winning the Super Bowl? I still haven't figured. It's still a great mystery to me. It might be to a lot of other people that have worked with human resource managers. Now, you might be a human resources manager, and this podcast is obviously gonna be hopefully relevant. But obviously, I'm targeting it more so at the business owners that want to actually build a $1 billion team. But what I would say is, if you're a human resources manager, maybe you have noticed this problem. You're not one of the problematic ones, but maybe you have seen that trend and you're frustrated by it, and you know that the industry can do better. So what I'm trying to do anyway is just find the winning methods for how we can actually build $1 billion teams. Because at the end of the day, as somebody that's entrepreneurial, what I care about is winning Super Bowls. Like, I'm not so much concerned about the particular human resources checkbook and checklist and this is a 25-year method or what. What I care about is, are we winning Super Bowls? And I think that's what a lot of the business owners that want to scale to $1 billion, that's what they care about, and that's what they're worried about is, are we gonna win the Super Bowl at the end of the season? So that's what this podcast is. And one last story is actually from a billionaire Steve Schwarzman, who is a kind of like a private equity Wall Street type of guy, and he was actually talking about how if I applied for a job at my own company, this is what he said in an interview. He said, if I were to apply for a job at my own company, I wouldn't get it. They wouldn't let me in, which is so funny. So he's built like a one of the largest fund management companies in the world, and he's basically telling you, if I actually were to be applying for a job at this company to which I've contributed enormous value and been such a tremendous employee and produced a lot of value basically for making the business what it is, because he's the guy that started the company, and yet he's telling you, if I, with all my skill set and all my know-how, if my resume back when I was, trying to get into companies, if I were to be one of those resumes that would land at whoever the hiring manager's desk, I probably wouldn't get in. And I think that's telling. And what does that mean? I think that tells you that the world of hiring, recruiting, team building, I mean, first, if they can't recognize that winning a Super Bowl with Tom Brady would be a much easier task, and then they wouldn't hire, the company wouldn't even hire the guy that made the company what it is. I think it's gotta tell you that there's a big gulf between how the human resources world thinks and operates and how profit-driven entrepreneurs and results-driven competitive achievers think. And that there's a really huge gap there, and I think it's a real failing of the human resources world. So that's all I have for podcast, the first podcast. Tune in next time for for the next